We have new reporting on North Korea, so let's bring in CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and Face the Nation moderator, Margaret Brennan. Margaret, what are you hearing?
Well, John, we are hearing that North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, may be prepared in very short order to carry out his first nuclear test in 5 years, this time of the kind of nuclear device that could be used on the battlefield as part of a tactical nuclear weapon. This is raising some real concern, not just among U.S. allies, but here in Washington itself, about what kind of response the U.S. would be able to carry out, given the fractured global alliances we're seeing, but also just what this signals in terms of really rattling our ally soul, which the United States has a treaty really dedicating us to preparing to defend in the potential of an inter-Korean conflict. So this is something that is raising increased concerns. And I want to underscore here, John, that South Korea's intelligence is saying they expect this test to happen on the cusp of the U.S. midterm elections.
So if that's what they're saying, which is that this has a connection with the midterm elections, can you put in context, I mean, what's the signal that is meant to send? While that may sound obvious, North Korea has cooked off about 44 missiles. Put this in the context of what U.S. officials think Kim Jong-un is up to.
So the United States is concerned that Kim Jong-un's rhetoric, a change that he recently made to a constitution in his country that would allow for first use of nuclear weapons, that all of this is not just noise, but actual pressure he's trying to apply here. He had kind of disappeared from the global scene for the past few years during COVID and after his diplomacy with former President Trump failed. Now this is a statement if he comes out and carries out this test. But in terms of the timing, the calculation from the South Koreans was that Kim Jong-un, who is very dependent on Beijing's largesse, would not dare carry out a test during the Chinese Communist Party Congress, but that he could carry out a test in this window before the U.S. midterm elections to put pressure on President Biden. All diplomatic efforts to date by the Biden administration haven't gotten anything for him, and this has been regularly an attempt to draw attention. You point out the missile tests. There have also been about 44 ballistic missile tests in the past year. So these are the kind of delivery mechanisms, the other kind of architecture and weaponry that Kim Jong-un is showing off to demonstrate that he does not want to be overlooked. And there is a very complicated calculus here when it comes to trying to go to the usual arsenal of punishments for bad behavior like this.
Well, exactly. So you mentioned not wanting to be overlooked. That's because the world community might be focused on either Ukraine or on what China is doing. So help us think through both the U.S. ability to manage those three challenges, those three hot challenges, Russia, China, and now maybe North Korea, and then how the international community responds to each of these autocrats choosing to assert their personalities at the same time.
Assert their personalities is definitely a way to put that in a very complicated way. It is. Well, one of the reasons why it's so complicated is that the go-to response has been international sanctions. But right now we have a United Nations UN Security Council that is incredibly fractured, with Beijing and Moscow, who both have veto power, not very comfortable with punishing bad behavior like this. In fact, when North Korea fired off a missile that flew over Japan at the beginning of October, Beijing and Moscow blocked it. So if you can't go to the established global order that you hear President Biden reference so often, what do? There's the military option, which is more of sort of a muscle flexing. Does the United States consider more military exercises? And in which case, is the public comfortable with that? We went through this debate during the Trump administration in terms of the degree to which the United States wants to continue to provide a very strong nuclear umbrella and keep U.S. forces on the Korean Peninsula. Just to remind Americans, the U.S. keeps a military presence in that country because the United States is sworn as a treaty ally to protect South Korea. So even if this is just a test, the other concern here is that Kim Jong-un could instigate some sort of incident. There could be a miscalculation. There could be an inter-Korean conflict. And one State Department official I spoke with in recent days really is worried that the rhetoric is laying the groundwork for something to happen here that would force the United States to make a decision in Asia as to how it needs to get involved or not.
So there's all of that complexity with respect to North Korea. Before you leave, Margaret, I want to get your thoughts on another complicated area. Putin's invasion of Ukraine has caused Europe to ban, in December, there's a European ban on Russian crude oil that's going to kick in. So we've got that. And then how does that affect, how do you think, how's the administration preparing for that moment because of what it's going to do to oil prices, which then takes us to the complicated situation with the U.S. and the Saudis. Can you help us understand that? It's complicated, I know, but if anybody can explain it, you can.
Oh, God. Well, if you like chess, you will love my beat. When it comes to the Saudi Arabia, look, I mean, the long and short of it, John, is you're hearing a lot from President Biden and others about this frustration with the decision by the kingdom to take about 2 million barrels of oil off the market along with OPEC, and that this would, have the adverse effect to what they're trying to do, which is to cut off financial benefits from oil sales to Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin's part of OPEC. So this is where the frustration is with the administration. They are trying to put a cap on the amount of financial benefit Russia can pocket by getting the big economies to agree to, okay, if you still buy some Russian oil, you only buy it at a discounted price, so it's less money there. That's what this price cap conversation is among the G7 countries, the bigger economies. That doesn't necessarily work very well for all the other OPEC members in terms of affecting pricing of how they sell oil. Russia is already selling at about a 30% discount its oil to China because China doesn't care about these global sanctions. They're just fine with having Russia be their gas station and their ally. And so this is complicated for the United States because it's not really clear that the U.S. can really do anything to punish Saudi Arabia. But then at the same time, you have this cap in terms of the December 5th deadline you talked about with the Europeans to limit sales. And that could spike prices again. When I asked Amos Hochstein, President Biden's energy advisor, about this on Sunday, he tried to say, oh, we've got it handled by this emergency release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which will also take effect in December. So they're acknowledging that there could be some fluctuations in the market in December and arguing that the U.S. has to remain open to continued release of our emergency stockpile to offset that. But this is pretty messy, and it's not clear yet, John, how this is going to be resolved. It's also not clear that the U.S. can punish Saudi Arabia in any meaningful way. They remain our biggest buyer of U.S.-made weapons, a really important customer. So we're kind of limited.
Indeed. And this week, major U.S. financial institutions are in Saudi Arabia seeking their money for investment, another reason that the U.S. is limited. Margaret Brennan, thanks. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.